Hello, everyone. Eric here. This week, we're going to be talking about CI/CD. Now, this week's video isn't going to be that long, and the activity isn't going to be too involved. And that's mainly because of the topic. CI/CD is a very commonly thrown around bunch of terms, especially in engineering teams in big companies, but also in smaller companies and startups as well. Everyone benefits from CI and CD. And it's because these are such widely talked about topics that we want to share it with you guys. So you at least get exposed and learn just a little bit about these terms. So you'll be better equipped to deal with them in your internships, in your jobs, in your side projects, at hackathons, even. And that is why our activity for this week is also not going to be as involved. Essentially, you will just be writing at least 250 words on the topic that we are going to discuss in this video. So, without further ado, let's get going with the first term, CI. Now, CI stands for continuous integration. What is that? Basically, it's just automating testing. Now, remember, we did a testing module during this course where we instructed you guys and girls to think about some tests for a given program and how you could make sure that any additional changes wouldn't break, right? Wouldn't break features that already exist, and also how to look for edge cases for certain features. Continuous integration is sort of the next step. Essentially, after a code base has a bunch of tests for its code, well, it can get pretty tiresome and pretty messy to have to manually trigger those tests every time we want to see. Every time we add a new change to the code without continuous integration, we would have to go to our command line, hit our enter our command to test whether we're using Gradle or some C++ unit testing framework or PyUnit or PyTest. We would have to type all those commands ourselves. But with continuous integration, which is a feature that tools that offer continuous integration provide, these tools allow us to essentially automate that test. You can imagine a tool might look at our GitHub repo and monitor it every time that it receives a push. Our continuous integration tool might just run the tests automatically as soon as that code change is detected. That's kind of what the second bullet point is going on about. Pushed code, aka code that uh, is uploaded to GitHub or some other source control system. This code gets continually, aka automatically without human intervention, integrated, aka tested and merged with the main code base. But, and this is very important, that code is not necessarily pushed to live, to the production environment, to basically the place where your users or your customers or whoever else is actually using your code experiences it. Continuous integration doesn't necessarily imply deployment. That is what we're going to get to in the next slide. Sorry, not in the next slide, the next slide. This slide just shows you some of the common tools. Now, you're going to want to go back to the slides after when you look at your activity and just look up these tools. We have Travis, which if you are a UVA student, you will be working with in our CS 3240 course. Circle CI, very popular alternative. GitHub Actions, a recent development by GitHub themselves that allows you to do CI stuff just using their internal tools. It's pretty cool. And then you got some other stuff. Docker, Kubernetes doesn't really have a direct connection to continuous integration, but it's used a lot in conjunction with the tools like Travis, like Circle. for its own reasons, which is out of the scope of this video. So we're finally on to this slide talking about deployment. What is continuous deployment? It is an extension of CI. So all of these terms, they sort of envelop each other. They just add on some extra little considerations that they make. So CD, aka continuous deployment, is an extension of CI, aka it includes CI. But, and here's the difference, what does it add? It adds automated deployment. So actually pushing that code base to the live production environment, aka the code the users are actually experiencing. This is what we call live. This is what we call production. A lot of times the terms are used interchangeably. Most commonly, you'll hear production, however. You'll hear of your dev environment, which is the sort of computer slash servers that you use to just test your code while you're developing it, while you're figuring out all the bugs, while you're adding that new feature, right? And then the production environment is the stark contrast to that, where that's the place that your users go to, right? Your production server would be the server that essentially your users log onto or users get directed to when they type in your domain name. Let's say your Google. When users type google.com, they are redirected to a server. And this server serves up that production code. That's what production means. Now, one thing to consider with continuous deployment, however, is that this deployment is at the push of a button or command. So it's not entirely autonomous, right? It's automated in that the actual deployment, the actual actions of bringing that code, bringing that tested code, that integrated code, right? Because it's an extension of CI. Deployment happens after integration. You generally always want to push code to the production environment after you've tested it. Otherwise, if you haven't tested it, a lot of bugs could appear. Your customers could be very disappointed. So, deployment, continuous deployment, is really talking about just automating away that process, but not necessarily the deployment itself, the act, the kind of decision to deploy itself. This still has to be done manually by a person, by either clicking on a button using one of the tools or typing in a command using one of the tools, right? But most cases, it is just one command, one button, super simple. Not entirely autonomous, however. That's what we're going to get to in the next slide, because the next slide is talking about tools. Now, you'll notice that, well, a lot of these tools are the same as the integration tools. And that's where kind of the CI CD term coupling comes from. They're used together pretty much all the time. You're never going to just have a tool just for continuous integration because they're pretty similar. They're similar in the sense that they both try to monitor your code base, either looking at your GitHub repo or your GitLab repo, which is an alternative to GitHub, right? So they just both are meant to monitor for changes, but they just do different things, right? So it's super simple. If you have a tool that does CI, it probably also does CD, continuous deployment, right? So you got GitHub Actions, GitLab, Docker Kubernetes, again, not directly related to CI CD, but they're used very much with these tools like GitHub Actions, GitLab CI CD, Jenkins, Ansible. All these tools are very popular. Last but not least, we're going to be talking about continuous delivery. Now, again, this is an extension of deployment. So you can think, all right, first we have integration, then we have deployment, then delivery. Delivery extends on deployment, which extends on integration. So it includes everything. If you're delivering, it's implied that you've integrated, that you've tested the code. It's been integrated into the main code base. It implies that you have set up an automated process to deploy your code, right? So at the push of a button, your code goes from GitHub servers or wherever it is to the production environment, wherever that server is, whether, or even if it's not a server, if it's the Apple App Store, right? It gets submitted to the Apple App Store at the push of a button, right? Because that's deployment, right? At the push of a button is continuous deployment. Continuous delivery, however, automates that push, right? That's it. All delivery means, all continuous delivery sort of adds on is that it just makes that push of a button not necessary. It essentially just allows you to push to your GitHub repo. And if your tests pass, then that code gets automatically deployed. That is a concept of continuous delivery. Whereas if you were only wanting to do continuous deployment, then upon integration, upon your new code change successfully passing all tests, you would still have to push a button. You would still have to enter a command to deploy it. That's if you're only working under the concept of continuous deployment. But if you want to go that extra step and work under the concept of continuous delivery, now remember, these are all concepts that are implemented by tools. There isn't a tool called continuous delivery. There are tools that implement the concept of continuous delivery. Continuous delivery just allows you to, or is a concept wherein you don't have to push that button. Where as soon as you make that code change, as soon as you approve of it, right, that code change, if it passes the tests, does get deployed. That's what the second bullet point is talking about. Adds completely automated deployment, aka code changes that are integrated also automatically deployed. Integrated means just merged with the main branch of code, but not necessarily deployed. Deployed means actually pushed to the live environment or the production environment and run so users can experience the changes. Continuous delivery comes in and automates this whole experience. And of course, the common continuous delivery tools are pretty much the same as the continuous deployment and the continuous integration tools. Just like I explained earlier, if a maker of a continuous integration tool, well, not if, but a maker of a continuous integration tool can very easily add features for continuous deployment and very easily add features for continuous delivery. So the tools just tend to be the same. In summary, continuous integration. Think testing, think automated testing, but not deploying, just testing. Continuous deployment. Think, okay, we have testing. Now let's try to make it easy to deploy. What does deploy mean? Making our code actually run with customers, for people that we want to run that code for. But not exactly making it automatic, right? Just hiding it or not hiding it, but implementing it under a push of a button or a command, etc. That's continuous deployment. Continuous delivery expands upon continuous deployment. And it takes that button away, makes that button automatic, right? So that once you push or once you merge your change into the main branch, your code is tested, right? And if the tests pass, then your code is automatically deployed. No need for the button. This is continuous delivery. I can understand if it's confusing. They all use the word continuous even though they mean slightly different things for each term. Hopefully, by going back through the slides, you are able to understand it better. If you don't understand it completely yet, don't worry. You won't be um, tasked or assigned to implement these concepts, not at all. Essentially, just for the activity, there will be a link to a Google document, which you will make a copy of, and you'll just be instructed to go back to the slides, look at the tools that were mentioned in the slides, and just research them. Pick two tools, any two you want, and look at how they're different, how they're priced, because these are all businesses, companies that want to make money off of these tools. So the pricing is going to be different, and the features and all those other things. So this is our lesson for today, CI/CD. Hope you all learned something, and good luck on the activity.